Is that group call?
Yeah.
You said that.
I mean, like I said it in a better way, but I was like, well, because we are not really focused on climate change, you know, the next couple of months are not. I was like, instead, we're just still working with our students to like make the goals famous.
Okay, good morning, everyone, and good evening to our friends in Taiwan. Welcome to this year's International Youth Forum series. My name is Amina Massoub, and I'm the Director of Education Programs at the World Affairs Council of Pittsburgh, which is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization dedicated to promoting a deeper understanding of key global issues. I'm joined here by my colleague, Sam Gonzalez, who is an Education Program Manager at the Council. We're really excited to have some of our Global Leadership Certificate schools on board today, as well as students who are pursuing Global Scholars diplomas in their own schools. Please note that the session is being recorded. And with that, I'd like to welcome all of the schools participating. So please say hello when I call your school name. So the affiliated high school of Chongqing University in Taiwan.
Hello.
So it's pretty late at night there. And guests at Chongqing University. Say hello. Thanks for staying up past my bedtime. Students here at Cornell High School.
Hello.
Del Valley High School in Austin, Texas.
Hello.
Hampton High School.
What's my moderator username?
Okay, Hampton dropped off. Northwestern High School in Erie, Pennsylvania.
Oh.
Peters Township High School will join us for the sessions following this. Pittsburgh Alderdice High School. On this morning? Okay. And Quaker Valley High School.
Called in.
And I see that Hampton has joined us. Do you want to give us a wave and a hello?
Hi.
Great, thank you. So this year we are focusing on the global goals for sustainable development. These are exciting targets for improving lives, eradicating poverty, and addressing climate change that were agreed upon at the United Nations General Assembly in September. So these are really new. Good morning at Alderdice. Can you mute your microphone, please? Hi. Great. So the global goals are the targets that are agreed upon for the next 15 years. So if you think about how old you are now and add 15, so you're going to be full-grown adults. You might have families, kids, houses, at least a car, maybe by then, depending on where you live. And so, you know, these are goals that are going to affect your lives as an adult. So we'll meet 4 times over the course of the school year. So this is the 4th year that we've held this particular program. And we've changed it and adapted it each year based on student and teacher feedback. So I want to thank the teachers who contributed to helping us to really envision this year's program. So actually almost all the teachers who are on today's session helped in some way. So this year we are starting with 2 expert speakers from Save the Children US, which is an international development organization that played a key role in developing and advocating for the global goals. For the sessions in December and February, we'll focus on the goals that you think are the most important through student-led discussions. Between February and April, you and your fellow students will choose a goal and take action on that goal. And like I said, today we will first hear from 2 speakers from Save the Children. They'll make brief comments on the global goals, and you'll have time to ask them lots of questions. For the second half of the session, we'll have the chance to talk about the questions that you responded to prepare for this session, led by 2 student moderators here from Cornell. So now I'll turn things over to Jenny Russell and Kelsey Nulf at Save the Children and Save the Children Action Network. If the 2 of you could introduce yourselves, and then we'll hear what you have to say.
Hi.
Hi.
Good morning.
Nice to see you and nice to see such a global group of students this morning from all over the world. My name is Jenny Russell and this is Kelsey Nelf. And as Amita said, we're from Save the Children. And we have been very involved over the last 3-4 years in advocating to shape and influence what the global goals would be. So I'm going to give a little bit of an overview about the goals, and then Kelsey's going to talk a little bit about taking action and getting involved in your community. So every year, you probably are aware that there's a meeting at the United Nations. It's their general meeting, annual meeting, where heads of state, presidents, and come into New York and they talk about big global issues. And this year was particularly important for all the member nations of the United Nations because, as Mina said, they signed on to a new set of global goals. And this year was also special, as you know, because the Pope came to New York and gave a speech. It was also the 70th anniversary of the United Nations. And as you also know, we were in the midst of a humanitarian crisis. So it was really an important time for all the world leaders to come together and talk about both what to do about current global crises, but also how to join together in an aspirational way to deliver on these new global goals. So around the time you were all born, around in 2000 or so, the world leaders signed on to the Millennium Development Goals. And those were 8 human development goals that had to do with alleviating poverty and reducing infant and maternal mortality, access to education. There were 8 goals. And they were really to bring the rich countries together to determine how to alleviate some of the poverty and suffering in poor countries. So these 8 global goals were developed in year 2000, and they were set to expire in 2015. So over the last 3 years, the global community has come together knowing that those Millennium Development Goals were about to expire to start thinking about how to create new global goals. And we made a lot of progress under the MDGs. About half of the world living standards were improved and people moved from, out of extreme poverty.
Recording has started.
Also about half, we achieved our target to half infant and maternal mortality. Also, kids got access to education and at equal numbers, males and females. So both girls, so there is almost gender parity in school now across the world. There's equal access for girls and boys. So we made a lot of progress under the MDGs, but we didn't finish the job completely, which is really the purpose of the next set of goals for the next 15 years. So there's a key difference between these new set of goals, which are 17 goals, and the MDGs. So that these new set of goals are called the Sustainable Development Goals, or for short, the Global Goals. So one key difference is that it's a much bigger set of goals. And we moved from 8 really human development goals to 17 goals. So it's a much bigger framework. It'll be much more challenging for countries around the world to track progress on 17 goals. Another key difference is that this framework is set to both improve people, human development, and the planet. So it's an integrated framework that includes work on trying to alleviate human suffering and boost incomes and human living standards, but also it's supposed to help repair our planet, prevent further environmental degradation and problems around climate change. So it's a development and climate and environmental framework. Another key difference is that there are new goals that obviously weren't in the MDGs, and they're around issues like accountability, ending corruption, governance, issues around inequality, how to reduce inequality, both between countries and within countries. So there's some exciting new aspects to the global goals. The other key difference, which is one of the most important differences, I think, from the Millennium Development Goals, is that the global goals are universal. They are to apply to every country in the world, and every country in the world, every member of the United Nations signed on to these goals in September and committed not only to implement them through through their foreign assistance around the world, but also to implement them at home. So for the United States, President Obama, in a speech at the UN 2 weeks ago, committed to implementing this goal framework here in the United States. So a few things that we're really, Save the Children is really happy about, and we think is going to improve the lives of kids that are contained in these global goals. One is a goal on ensuring healthy lives. So there is a goal on health, and in the MDGs there was also a goal on health. But in this set of goals, there is a goal that, or a target, which is to end preventable infant and child deaths. So children that die from preventable causes, we are saying that will no longer occur, that we will solve problems dealing with nutrition and other things that lead to preventable child deaths. And it was very exciting for Save the Children when Obama talked about in his speech the importance of preventing infant and child deaths overseas, but also here at home. Another exciting feature of the new global goals is a goal on equitable education. So in the first set of MDGs, they talked about access to education. But one problem was that they got kids in schools, but the kids were not learning because there weren't sufficient salary for teachers, or the kids were in overcrowded classrooms. There weren't enough schools built, adequate schools. So while they could claim that kids had access to education, in many cases they weren't learning. So in this set of goals, there's actually a goal on equitable learning and to track both the kids in rural and in urban areas and boys and girls, and make sure that everyone is learning at an adequate level. And thirdly, I would say what's really exciting is the goal on inequality. Save the Children believes very strongly that these goals should be for some of the most deprived, the poorest, and the kids are the most excluded from the benefits of society in every country. And so there's a goal in this framework, as I mentioned, on reducing the gap between the kids that the haves and the have-nots, and that's both across countries but also within countries. So it applies to the poorest children in the United States as well. And as you know, if you just look at infant mortality rates, there are cities and counties within the United States that have the same, if not worse, infant mortality rates as countries like Botswana or other countries in Africa, for example. So these goals are really exciting because they really represent the aspiration that we have as a global community over the next 15 years. And as I said, there's an amazing opportunity here. The window is open for us to use these goals to hold governments accountable. And 193 nations signed on to this goal framework. So just to say, what does this mean for the United States? And then I'll turn it over to Kelsey. So in every country, they have committed to these goals, and governments are right now figuring out how to create an implementation plan for their country on how to implement these goals. And the United States is doing this right now also. So there's this framework of 17 goals. Every country is taking those 17 goals and creating national targets to fit those goals. So if you look at the health goal, for example, there are many health targets within the health goal that might not apply to the United States, and some that do. And I think the ones that do are, for instance, ending epidemics of AIDS, tuberculosis, malaria. Certainly AIDS has not been completely eliminated in this country, so the United States will take that global target and determine a national target for it. If you look at the first goal on ending poverty, at the rate of $1.25 a day, United States, that particular target mainly applies to poor countries, but for the United States, we could look at the way income inequality, for example, and how income and wealth is distributed in this country. So the United States would create targets not as much in terms of eradicating extreme poverty, because our living standards are a bit higher than other countries, but what we need to look at is looking at income inequality. In terms of the gender goal, there is a target on eliminating child marriage, which would apply to a lot of countries, not as much in the United States, but there's also targets on ending all forms of discrimination against men and women and girls. So that is another example of a target that we need, as Americans, need to make sure is ambitious for the United States. And just one more example, there's a goal on cities, and so if you look at the situation in Pittsburgh, the goal is around ensuring access to adequate, safe, and affordable housing for all. So maybe there is some work specifically that Pittsburgh or other cities across the country is going to do related to that target and that goal on affordable housing. So there's there's 17 goals, and I think you probably have those goals in front of you, but they, as you see, they touch on everything. So any American can use this framework to push the issues that they care about and hold their governments responsible for meeting those targets. So another thing that can be done is asking cities to sign on to the global goals. And I know there was a meeting of cities at the UN, and some mayors came and proclaimed their commitment towards these global goals and creating a city kind of strategy to reach these goals. And I know that cities around the country did that for Agenda 21, which came out of the Rio meetings on environment and climate, that cities across the country, I think 450 cities, signed on to the Agenda 21. So I think the same thing can happen. So I would, just to close, thank you so much for your interest, and I would encourage you to really look closely at the goals and the targets and think about kind of anything that you can do through your school or personally or through your church to figure out how to kind of push at the city level and other places in terms of helping to reach these goals and targets over the next 15 years.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We are so excited to talk with all of you this morning. My name is Kelsey Nulf, and I lead youth engagement efforts for Save the Children Action Network. So I work with students like you all across the country, high school and college students, to engage them in the work of our organization and to empower them to be forces in their communities, to describe these issues, real issues to people within their communities and schools. And so I'm so excited to talk with all of you today a little bit about how you can kind of take these global goals and put them into action within your communities. I know that I'm sure as you were reading about these goals and as you've learned about them, it can seem so overwhelming. I mean, every time I sit down to read through the targets and goals, I'm like, oh my gosh, there is so much work to be done. And there truly is a lot of work to be done. I think it's important to celebrate the successes that we've had so far. We have made tremendous strides as a global community, but there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. And I often tell my students that a lot of that work is on your shoulders. You all will be world leaders someday, I'm sure of it. You'll be leaders within your community and within your world. And so it's so important that you understand what the global goals are, why, the significance behind them, the difference that they will make for our world. And so you ultimately can really use your voice. There are so many different ways I think that you can make a difference in the world. As an employee of the Action Network, I would employ you to use your voice to make a difference. I think when we talk about advocacy work and the importance of using your voice kind of puts students on a level playing field. All of you have a voice, and ultimately I think that you can make the most difference using your voice, talking to elected officials about the importance of these goals, writing an op-ed in your local newspaper and your school newspaper to communicate your passion behind these goals. We talk about a lot why advocacy is so important, and ultimately you all have a really unique voice to lend to the situation. World leaders and elected officials hear from adults a lot of the time. Adults are constantly calling them, they're writing them, explaining why they're passionate about different issues, why they want them to sign on to certain pieces of legislation. But the age group that they hear from the least is high school students. And so when a high school student is really passionate and explains their passion and is able to articulate kind of the desire for change and the need to be engaged in community, that really sticks out to an elected official. And so your voice is so important. Really, these goals are one of the facets I think that we've focused on the most at the Action Network in terms of the goals is holding government officials accountable for achieving the goals. So something that happened with the Millennium Development Goals, while we did make a lot of progress, one of the, I think, downsides when we were looking back and kind of evaluating how the process worked was that not enough people really understood what the Millennium Development Goals were and why they were so significant for achieving global progress. And so if you don't know what the goals are and you're not able to articulate those and to share that with other people, it makes, I think, for a little bit of a tricky situation because government officials have been tasked with this agenda to achieve over 15 years, and if people are not holding them accountable and reminding them of the promises that they've made and the importance of fulfilling those promises, then it's pretty easy over those 15 years to kind of forget about the different things that you're supposed to be working on. So we tell students a lot of the time that holding your government officials accountable is one of the most important things that you can do. And one voice really does make a difference. So your voice really makes a difference. I know that it can all, like I said, seem kind of overwhelming. So, when I was thinking about this presentation and different things that you could be doing within your community, I would say that, you know, you all are surrounded. I mean, I'm looking at the screen and I can't believe how many of you are in a classroom with so many other students that care about these issues, which is a really incredible thing in a lot of ways. So you are already within a community of people that care about these issues, and you can work together to achieve change. And so I think that, you know, one of the things that we talk about is focusing on one issue. So if you can find one of the goals that you're passionate about or one of the targets that you're passionate about. So for our students, we focus heavily on maternal and newborn child survival. We deeply believe that no mother or child should die from treatable or preventable causes in another country and here in the US. And so our students then say, okay, I'm passionate about this. What is one thing that I can do? And so for us, we just debuted a new piece of legislation that was introduced in the Senate and in the House called the REACH Act. And I can send Amina more information about this, but our students also, like, one of the things that they do is collect petition signatures. So they talk to their friends and their community members and classmates, and they explain why they're passionate about maternal and newborn child survival. And then they ask that a student sign a petition to show their elected official, their senator, their congressperson, why this is important to them. So that's just an example of something that you can do to really make your voice be heard. Like I said, writing an op-ed is another great example of that, and I can share, you know, some guidelines that we share with our students to be published in a local media, which is, you know, seen by so many people, not just community members, but elected officials and leaders within your community. And then I would say that, you know, it sounds like there are a lot of initiatives in Pittsburgh and in the communities that you live in that are attached to the goals. So find out about those initiatives and get involved. You really can make a difference on a community level, and I would encourage you to do so. So I want to commend all of you for learning about these goals, for taking time out of your busy lives to say this is important and I want to be involved. I think it's a tremendous thing. And so congratulations to all of you for your work so far, and best of luck for your work to come.
Okay, thank you so much. I think that was really, hopefully, pretty comprehensive. So you have a sense of what, you know, what is behind the goals and some actions moving forward. I just want to ask a quick question, because I feel like this is something that we often talk about during these video conferences, and I think that students are thinking about their futures too, so not just their junior or senior year, wherever they are right now in high school, but kind of thinking ahead. And 15 years is a long time, so you know, it seems like there are going to be a lot of kind of jobs and things that are going to be associated with fulfilling these goals over time. And I was wondering if you could just give a quick plug about, you know, since you are both working in this space, what kind of jobs, you know, are there to help fulfill these goals, both maybe in the U.S. and abroad?
Well, I'll start. I would just say definitely in the area of green energy. If any of you are interested in science, math, engineering, there's going to be a lot of jobs in green energy and kind of sustainable growth, green growth. And I would say also, you know, in the kind of basic services industry, it will continue in terms of focusing on kind of basic health, both in the U.S., but also ensuring, you know, unfortunately with climate change, we're going to continue to deal with issues around humanitarian crisis and emergencies and weather-related disasters. And so, you know, issues around kind of health professionals will be needed, and certainly development professionals like at Save the Children. So that's a few, but Kelsey has.
I always make a plug for public policy and advocacy. So I think that, you know, using your voice, as I've said now many times, is so important. And you know, our policy officials here and our employees that are focused on advocacy are really sometimes the ones that are pushing the agendas and making sure that leaders are held accountable. And with that, I am very passionate about grassroots mobilizing. So I think we always need powerful community members to take on initiatives, you know, on the ground, and to connect these big overarching goals that seem so huge to the community level. So I think that, you know, there's always such a need, I think, for people that are passionate about advocacy and really making a difference on their community level and on a greater level too.
Thanks so much. Yeah, so I just wanted to connect that because I think sometimes we talk about things and you might think about an issue that's kind of like over there, but this is actually something where you can kind of get your, you know, get into the meat of it. So, so I want to open it up to any questions. I know the students always have tons of questions. So any questions that you have, I'm going to start here at Cornell, and then we'll just kind of do a round robin. So any questions that you have for Kelsey or Jenny? Good. All right, Ashley, do you okay. All right. So we have some shy people here, so I'll just take note of that. So can we turn to maybe the affiliated high school at Chung-Sing University? I think you often have questions, so we'll turn to you now, and then we'll kind of just run our way down the list.
You just mentioned about the Millennium Goals has met some difficulties, like people don't know why they have to set the Millennium Goals, and I want to know how could we reflect on this to reach the new global goals?
So that's a great question, and thankfully the United Nations and the Secretary General of the UN thought similarly that we needed to reflect on how we did on the Millennium Development Goals and take all those lessons to ensure that we do better on the Sustainable Development Goals and end poverty for, you know, extreme poverty forever, and reach all or hit all of the unfinished business of the Millennium Development Goals next time. So that has been a process over the last 3 years to develop this new framework of global goals. And there was the UN did a survey called My World, and maybe some of you took that survey, but it asked people and students of all ages all over the world in all countries, what are your highest priorities? What are the things that are most important to you that have to go into these goals? And this survey was done over about 1.5 years, and 7 million people responded. And the thing that was highest on the list of all things was education, the importance of education, and for every child to have access to education, and to have good quality education. So, but all of those responses from that survey, as well as other meetings that happened through those 3 years, helped people reflect and evaluate how we did on the Millennium Development Goals in order to shape the new global goals.
Okay, so we have a couple questions here, and then we'll turn to Del Valle if you have any questions. So we'll start with Ashley, and we have another question from Duncan too.
Okay, so I was wondering, if these goals aren't law-abiding, how is the UN ensuring that all goals are being met throughout every country?
And Duncan, do you want to ask your question too, and then you can kind of answer both?
Yeah, my question was, like, I don't get, like, why, like, since the officials agreed on binding with the laws and the global changes, like, why we need to remind them. But since they made the agreement, like, I thought that they should be holding themselves accountable.
Huh. Okay. Not to laugh, but yes. Okay, good question.
Yeah.
And then kind of on the same topic of that, if we were to hold the government officials for the 8 goals, how are they, and they didn't really manage that, how are we going to hold them accountable for the 17 goals?
Okay, good questions. So that is a very good question in terms of if they're not, you know, if it's not a mandatory framework, why would governments abide? If it's not part of law, law, then why would countries abide? Well, countries sign on to all sorts of non-binding treaties and agreements through the UN, and they hold each other accountable to those under something called horizontal enforcement. They see how other countries behave, and they behave similarly. So one thing that will be very important for these global goals will be for there to be a couple countries in all income levels, so poor countries and wealthy countries and middle income countries like Brazil or China, to become champions of these goals and show the other countries that they are serious. And so that has been our job at Save the Children, to make sure that the United States becomes a champion country, so that they can show that that they are one of the most powerful countries that are serious about implementing these goals. So in terms of the question about, why, they know that they signed on, why do we need to hold them accountable? It's a great question. I'd say that the United States, the government and the president says they're going to do all sorts of things. And as you know, sometimes those things don't always happen successfully. So even though they said they were going to do it, we need to make sure that they actually do, in fact, do what they say they're going to do. So it's the citizens of this country and citizens of all other countries to make sure that their government's serious about implementing these goals. And countries are busy, and they've got a lot of priorities. They have, if the United States is truly serious about these goals, it's going to cost them money. We're going to have to put a huge amount of budget into it. So that's not easy for governments to spend money, and it's very controversial. It'll be controversial on Capitol Hill with Congress. So that's why citizens talking about how important it is to them really, really, really makes a difference, especially students like you guys.
Yeah, and I think it applies pressure so that if they know that a lot of people are interested in seeing these goals achieved and that it means a lot to a lot of people, then they'll probably be more apt to follow through with what they're saying. If people aren't applying pressure, then as Jenny's saying, they are difficult to achieve. These are huge, huge goals and huge, I think we just have a lot to solve in the next 15 years. And so if they understand that the majority of the U.S. population really feels that these goals are important and really wants to see an end to extreme poverty, an end to deaths of moms and babies, both here in the U.S. and internationally, wants to see, all children have the right to education, then it means that you guys and us and really, caring citizens need to be committed to saying to our government officials, these goals are really important, and we really do care that we see an end to extreme poverty, and we do care, about X, Y, and Z. And so when we say applying pressure, I think that that's what we mean, to make sure that they're following through with their promises.
Thank you. And just a little quip is that sometimes the loudest voice gets heard. And so, on your own, you might not be able to be the loudest voice, but collectively, there's some volume here, so that's interesting. All right, so let's do a quick show of hands to see who has a question. You could raise your hand so I don't awkwardly call on you if you don't have a question. Okay, so let's turn to, it looks like Northwestern High School. Did you have a question?
Yes. Our question is, young people being married is a practice that many countries around the world take. What can STC or the UN do to kind of protect those children?
That's a great question. So just to say that Kelsey and I are kind of policy and advocacy people, and don't work on the programming side of Save the Children. So we are not so familiar with exactly the programmatic interventions that Save the Children and other groups like us take to solve the problem of early forced child marriage. But I would say, you know, just in terms of our understanding and expertise, raising awareness about the problem is the first place to start, and showing where those countries are where this practice is being carried out, and kind of putting a spotlight on it and writing about it, writing op-eds, writing blogs, you know, going on the radio and talking about it. Raising awareness is really the first place to start. And then in addition to that, there's groups like Save the Children and others that come in and do education on the ground in those places as well, to ensure that girls know that they have rights, and that they should not be forced into situations that are uncomfortable for them and would impede, for example, in their education and their chance to exercise their free liberties.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that makes me most proud to work for Save the Children is that Save the Children is really committed to employing members of the community. So we don't have, you know, people that live in the U.S. go and work in another country, because we because we really fundamentally believe that the people that already live in the community know the community best and know the needs of that community best, and how to proactively take steps to correct some of the social problems that persist in those communities. And so I know, you know, while we're not on the programmatic side, that many of our colleagues are concerned about that. And I know that, you know, we do programming on the ground in those areas. And I think that, you know, in the countries where that is an issue, I think that we're actively, you know, trying to put an end to that. So great question.
So it looked like Pittsburgh Alderdice and Quaker Valley both had questions. So we'll take the question from Alderdice and then immediately take the question from Quaker Valley, and then perhaps you can kind of piggyback in the answer, because I know I want to be conscious of your time. I know you have to get to work in DC on the important things that you do. So we'll start with Alderdice.
We live in a very conflicted time, and you know, a lot of regions now seem to have almost perpetual warfare. A lot of times those places that need us most are also the most dangerous for foreign aid workers. We see Afghanistan's one of the only countries with polio, and yet what just happened a few weeks ago with Doctors Without Borders, the unfortunate incident. How does Save the Children balance the safety of their workers and of those on the ground with the goals that we're trying to enforce globally?
No softball questions here. We'll turn to Quaker Valley and answer your question.
Publication Bittersweet.
Okay, so pertaining to child death that can be prevented.
Our announcements are on, and we'll just.
Okay. Our announcements are on. Oh, should I go now?
Our announcements are on right now, so can we ask after you guys answer Alderdice's question?
That's fine. That's fine.
Sorry. Thank you. Sorry.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for the great question. You know, I think that is kind of the heart of the challenges that Save the Children faces and communities face all around the world. Save the Children just released a report on kind of achieving development outcomes in conflict and fragile states like Afghanistan, you know, like Liberia, Sierra Leone, a lot of the countries around the world that are both facing development challenges and conflicts at the same time. And I don't know if you're aware, but Save the Children just had, within the last year, I think 6 staff were killed in Afghanistan that worked with us as part of our staff. And so this is a very real issue for us. But as Kelsey said, I think one thing that is important is that Save the Children works within communities. We don't bring people in from the outside, which I think would aggravate any conflict, particularly Americans. We work with community members to try to address these development challenges. So, you know, I think that it's a continuing challenge that is really difficult. You want to add anything to that?
No, I just.
Can I also just piggyback on that a little bit? Because Jenny, in your bio, it said that you've worked in some places that weren't always the safest. And so, do you have like a sentence that you could say about, you know, yourself, the experiences you might have had?
Yes. So I traveled to Sudan. I lived in Nicaragua. I often tell my kids about getting held up at gunpoint. I've had some experiences that were, you know, as a development professional that were, you know, scary and kind of conflict affected places. And I think that it's about, you know, the reason why I think this goal framework includes the goal 16 on peace and governance is around making sure that governments, again, are held responsible to not only ensure, you know, resources go to development, but also resources and political attention go to solving the conflicts within the country. And I think the United States can, in many cases, can provide resources to and political attention towards those conflicts as well in terms of getting to peace agreements. So I think it's a very difficult, challenging issue for us.
Okay, sorry, and Kelsey, I interrupted you. So what is your...
No, I mean, I just think that, yeah, I mean, I think that whenever staff are deployed, especially for emergency response, when, you know, we need a lot of staff members in the field right away, I think that safety for Save the Children is key. And so we do not, you know, send staff members to a conflict, you know, area unless we're sure that they're in a secure space. And when the Ebola crisis struck, you know, we took, I mean, I think tremendous precaution to ensure that staff were safe, because obviously if staff are not safe, then they can't perform in the ways that they need to help the community. So, and I just think that safety is key, but it's a great question, you know, something that we struggle with and are constantly, you know, I think trying to address.
Great, thank you. And so Quaker Valley, hopefully your announcements are done.
Are you muted? Should I just ask?
Oh, no, it's on.
Okay. So my question is pertaining to childbirth and like death with that can be prevented. A lot of that happens with people who can't pay, who are too poor. What are like some concrete programs that would help stop this? Like, do we have any actual like plans that we could do to like stop it? I don't know.
Yeah,
well,
so
your class change is way more exciting than our most class changes. All right, cheers.
So I think, you know, that's one of the things that Save the Children Action Network is working on is the REACH Act, which I mentioned has been introduced now in the House and in the Senate, and it's meant as an act to really step up the U.S. government's commitment to ending treatable and preventable deaths of moms and babies. And some of the things that we're asking for in the bill are making sure that moms have access to prenatal care, so meaning that we're working to provide extra funding to employ people in communities where, you know, maternal survival is really at risk, to ensure that we have enough healthcare workers to visit moms who are expecting babies and when babies are born. We always say here that we want to see every child live to their 5th birthday, because a lot of evidence shows that once that child gets to their 5th birthday, it gets a little bit easier after that point. And so, you know, making sure that moms have access to health care, that moms, you know, have access to vaccinations when their child is born, that young girls in developing countries are taught about the importance of family planning, and that even, you know, moms in other countries are taught about the importance of spacing out births so that they're not having child after child after child. And so a huge, you know, part of that is education. And that's really, you know, we're asking the U.S. government to step up their commitment to ensure that we have funding to educate people in other countries.
And I would just add that that, you know, the health goal includes targets, you know, like ending preventable child deaths, but we will not succeed at ending preventable infant deaths and maternal deaths without some of the other goals in the global goals. For example, we have to have clean water in order to, you know, for women and and infants during the birthing process. We have to have adequate and safe roads. For example, if a mother needs to be transported during childbirth. So I think the global goals were constructed as a holistic framework, that with the idea that you can't achieve the targets under the health goal unless you achieve the targets in many of the other goals. So you won't have good health without clean water, good roads, good women's education, and many other components of the goals.
It's all interconnected.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for this really helpful overview and getting us excited about ways that students can use their voice to push this forward. Have a great rest of your day.
All right,
Yeah,
thank you so much.
Okay, so now it's your turn. So we've heard we've heard a lot from Kelsey and Jenny, and so we're gonna turn to Rachel and Duncan. So if you can give a wave.
Oh,
So we have the next about 35 minutes to talk about the global goals and to consider some of the questions. And you know, we have some questions here that are you know, we can use as guideposts, but you know, any other questions that you want to talk about and bring up too are great. So those of you who've done this style of video conference before know that it's a student-led discussion. And so before we get started on that, it's always helpful to have some what I call rules of engagement, or just kind of, you know, some ideas on what we could do to make this move smoothly. So are there any things that might be helpful to make a conversation among, you know, 8 or 9 different schools via video conference to make it go well? And anyone can respond here. So what might help? Yeah. No, we're not muted, but yeah. Anyone here want to add, think of anything that might be helpful in a discussion to make things go smoothly?
Don't interrupt each other.
Okay, so don't interrupt each other. So, and on kind of piggybacking on that, is there a way that you would like to signal that you want to talk?
There's probably something we can agree on. I don't really. Maybe raising our hands or something.
Okay, is that something that other schools are comfortable with, like maybe raising hands? Yeah. Is that good? Okay, I'm getting a thumbs up from Alderdice. Anything else that might be helpful? I'm seeing Alderdice. So you're raising your hand, which is really helpful. So Alderdice, what do you think? And I think you need to unmute.
Perfect. We're good. When we were speaking about the global goals, we spoke of equitable education, right? Everyone should have an opportunity to learn adequately. I think that we could also apply that here, equitable speech, right? Allow all schools to contribute in a more or less fair manner.
Awesome. Okay. Does everyone agree that that sounds like a good idea? Okay. Okay, good. I'm getting a thumbs up here. Okay, anything else? I like that we're tying into the global goals too. So any other things that, any other kind of rules of engagement that might be helpful? Okay, I'm seeing a hand at Quaker Valley.
Is it unmuted? Okay. I feel like that we should all, each school that is involved in these conversations and these conferences should at least like have some knowledge on what this topic is, and we should all do a little, not a lot of research, but just a little bit, so we all have some background information and we're all understanding what these goals are and what we're talking about.
Okay, and so to kind of translate that, you said it in such a nice way, but kind of like do your homework is what it sounds like. How does that sound to everyone? Sound good? I'm getting some nods here. Okay, good. Anything else that you want to add to that? Okay. Okay, so we have don't interrupt, raise your hands, let's be equitable and hear from everyone, and kind of, you know, get some do some research and do your homework. Okay, one more.
Or, I think we should like probably like have like certain schools like have just like specify on like different topics.
Okay.
So like whenever we ask questions, we like know like that group or that school knows about like a lot about what that issue is, and they can ask more questions and like know more.
Okay, so maybe some of the schools could be kind of experts on topics. How does that sound? Okay. Get some nods. Okay, so let's so from here, now that we have some rules of engagement, I'd like to pass the torch over to Rachel and Duncan. You had about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 questions that you kind of prepared for this session, and those were just kind of, you know, suggestions. So you can kind of do whatever you want with them, since it's your conversation to have. So, Rachel and Duncan, lead us, fierce leaders.
Would any school like to start by talking about some of the questions that we had? Does anybody think that they have a strong answer that they would like to give to the group for any of the questions that they're passionate about? The questions were, what are the overreaching goals of the global goals for sustainable development? What are some of the challenges or risks of these goals? What are some of the rewards? How might goals be implemented in different ways in more development and less developed countries? And what goals do you find most relevant to your personal lives?
Okay, so we've been raising our hand, but probably it's not obvious, so perhaps we can go ahead and
okay, go for it.
And we think the most overarching goal for Taiwan, among others, is the 12th goal, responsible consumption and production. Since a situation frequently happening in Taiwan is that people tend to buy redundant stuff in discounts, or they even have an impulse purchase rather than they really know what they need. And this may lead to a serious overconsumption problem, and thus contributes to unnecessary waste, which ranges from food to commodities and resulting in hunger and environmental pollution in other way. And data from Worldwide Fund for Future shows that the consumption a Taiwanese made is 3.42 times as much as an average global citizen's made. So we think, so this is why we regard responsible consumption production as the most overarching goals. And once we reach the goal, many other problems may subsequently be solved. Thank you.
Does anybody else have any ideas on what goals are most relevant to their personal lives? All right, Northwestern?
I know there's a big problem. I know there's a big problem in the world dealing with bullying and cyberbullying over the internet and in school districts. What would we be able to do to compensate or fix that?
Like, ask the question back, like, what goal might that fall under?
I think it would fall under goal 10.
Northwestern, what goal do you think that would fall under?
Yeah.
We'll get back to you.
Does any other school have any idea what goal that would fall under, cyberbullying?
We think it's 10 or 5.
I think it's 10.
I think it's 10.
Can you say it out into the camera?
I think
Yeah, go for it.
We think that it would fall under goal 10, which is reduced inequalities.
Or.
Okay. 4 or 5.
Okay. Says 5.
Be loud and clear.
It's like within too.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. By 2030, empowered and promote the social, economical, and political inclusions of all, irrespective of age, sex, disability, race, ethnicity, origin, religion, economic, or other status. That was on the goal reduced inequalities.
You know, like if it's you.
Any other schools agree that goal 10 would be a good place to put cyberbullying?
Okay, so turn to Quaker Valley.
Quaker Valley?
We think that under goal 10 would be a good place to place cyberbullying, but also another goal that we think is important is number 4, quality education, because the 2 speakers that we just talked a lot about getting advocacy inside of the communities, and for that to be possible, we need to educate those people in those communities so they're able to advocate for the other goals on here to make a better world, and especially those impoverished countries.
I completely agree. Does any other school have anything to respond to Quaker Valley's input?
I think they raised their hand up.
Go ahead, Quaker Valley.
And just to add on to that point, goal number 11, sustainable cities and communities, we think is also important because for in order for be like good education, like countrywide and different parts of the world, we have to have sustainable communities for there to be good schools, and education for those people.
So they can broaden and we can actually achieve all of these goals.
Anybody have a response to Quaker Valley or have any other goals that they feel like are important to their personal lives?
Muted.
Northwestern?
We have a kind of question tagging on to what they said. What qualities does a good equal education really have?
Does anybody have a response to Northwestern?
What does that mean?
Good question.
Equal education. Okay. Is it off? Okay. What I would think that equal education would bring or would bring to us or benefit us in certain ways is that we would know like what the rule, like what the laws are, what the laws are, and we can be informed of the rights that we have.
I feel like personally, to tie into what our speakers were saying earlier about young child marriage, is if we, like here in the United States, a lot of women know their rights, and I feel like to educate women in other countries that they have the same rights as any other woman across the nation could end issues such as young child marriage. Does school have any input on equal? Ashley?
There's this point that I want to read out under the targets in quality education. By 2030, ensure equal access for all women and men to affordable and quality technical, vocational, and tertiary education, including university.
So, what might that mean for kids here in the United States?
Does any? Yes, go ahead, Northwestern.
Going back to that basic quality education, how can we quantify a quality education? Because in many developed countries, we understand that, say, standardized testing does not always accurately represent the education level of a student. I don't know if is there anybody else who has any idea how you can determine what qualifies a quality education?
Anybody have a response to Northwestern?
Taiwan.
Go ahead.
I have some idea about quality education. I think that we attend school to learn some knowledge, but besides learning knowledge, I think we also have to learn some morality for when we become adults and going into the society. So I think how can we quantify the quality education? We may see the society order, and if our country is really in order and have less fights or conflicts happening in our country, then I think we have already attained the quality education. Thank you.
Do you all feel like you're getting quality educations?
Just start talking.
Talking more about quality education, teacher-student relationships, making sure that the teachers are approachable. I feel that a lot of success stories that you read, I don't know if you've seen Humans of New York or something, but like students who are inspired by their teachers and then they find their passion through what their teacher has inspired them to do, that increases the quality of education tenfold. Having a teacher be approachable, making the learning environment happier for the students, that would make higher quality.
And I feel like in our school especially, I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but our teachers are really good about that. So I feel like at Quaker Valley we really do have a good quality education.
Okay, any other schools? Yeah.
Do any other schools have a response? Alderdice?
Hi. So we're talking a lot about tertiary education in the United States and everyone having access to nice learning environments for teachers in high school and college. But I think in a lot of places in the world, in terms of the particular goal for having a quality education, I think making sure that the primary education for those kids exists and encompasses subjects that we take for granted, that we know, that they have the same opportunities that kids in primary school in the United States get, even at the better schools that we consider need a lot of help. So I think that the standards in the United States for what we can do in our own communities are very different when we're talking about that specific goal than in other countries that don't have the infrastructure in their schools yet to even be talking about tertiary education.
Right, and I think it even goes beyond the economic and structural factors. There's also a cultural aspect that is very important. In many countries, there is not really an emphasis on education. There's not a belief that it can lead to the same level of success. And even beyond that, even in families that want to send their children to school, there are factors not directly related to education, like poverty, that prevent those students from being able to go to school, or as people have raised, gender and the idea that maybe women should not be educated in some of these countries can prevent them. So I agree that we should focus more on primary education than tertiary.
Globally.
Yeah.
I mean, in our communities, tertiary education is relevant because we do have such good quality primary education.
So I'm going to just throw out a little challenge. So I just want to throw out a little challenge too, because in some schools, and you might know students like this, in some schools, maybe there's a school building and there are teachers, but the kids just don't even show up to school, or you might students who might be living in poverty in your own communities might not be able to go to school because they're watching their younger brothers or sisters, or they had a tragedy in their family and that's preventing them from going to school. What could how could quality education kind of address that even in our own communities?
I think personally, if you can make the school more of a welcoming place for the students, that the students would be more involved in, want that passion to go to school. Because I know that some students, might not want to go to school. So if you make that area or the school welcoming, that the students would rather go to school than, anything else.
Does any other school have a response to Amina's challenge?
Taiwan, and I think that the government should focus on every children, that because there are still some children that they cannot go to school because they have to go to work. So I think the government should, even though they have set some laws already, but they have to ensure that every children or students have go to school already. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Does any other school have a response to Amina's challenge?
Maybe keep the mic off.
And Taiwan has something to say. And we find that we have the problem that is about energy problem rather than education. So the biggest challenge in Taiwan is energy problem. And we would like to say something about energy.
The process of producing the solar panel not only leads to environmental pollution but also bring about harm to people. This become too serious problem that we should deal with. And we believe that the technology of nuclear power will improve, which will reduce environmental pollution. We believe the real damage of nuclear power is thermal pollution. So we hope that there will be substantial development in fast freezing technology, as well as decreasing the percentage of using the seawater to cool down the nuclear reactor. Thank you.
Thank you. If you don't mind me asking, can I have Hampton take the floor? Do you guys have any input on education or energy?
Yeah, so we'd like to just comment on the energy aspect that was just talked about. So here in the United States, like I think we've already got a pretty competitive edge in the global economy on advancing our energy here in the US. So we already have the solar credit system that was implemented a couple years ago that allows businesses to compete with each other. And I think that's the big thing here in the United States is businesses competing each other in the private sector. And I think that's really what's going to push forward advancing and meeting this goal here in the US. Just because the federal government can put money into researching it, but I think private businesses are really going to be where we're able to develop and advance the United States in producing energy that is environmentally friendly and also creating businesses that meet environmentally standard regulations set by the US government. So I think really in the US, and I'm sure many developed countries in the world, I think in the underdeveloped countries, they need to have more government intervention. From the developed countries, it's more just the private businesses going to be competing with each other to advance, because nowadays you're getting a lot more people that are interested and concerned about the environment and want to make action. So I mean, that's really all I had to say.
Okay, thank you. Does any other school have a counterpoint for Hampton? Alderdice? Alderdice, you can have.
We would actually like to echo some of Hampton's statements in that I think the past few years have, especially when oil prices went up after the 2008 recession, right? We saw this huge boost in the effort to get green energy. Right now, Toyota's saying that they're on their own without any government intervention. They intend to get rid of gas-fueled automobiles by 2050. And I think on a global scale, that's very pertinent not just to the developed countries that are purchasing those Toyota vehicles, but also because those countries that are less developed, that depend on agriculture for sustenance, global warming could have a serious effect on them, right? The loss of water in the Middle East, in North Africa, is one of the main sources of conflict. And we as developed countries, even without direct intervention, by choosing to be sustainable in our environmental policies, in our economy, we could be indirectly contributing to alleviating or at least slowing down some of the violence and deterioration of agriculture across the world.
So in addition to add on to that, I think the main role the U.S. can play in a lot of those global goals and what it can do globally, even coming from our own communities, is setting an example, is participating in those markets and perpetuating that furtherment of those goals in the private sector.
Thank you. Does any other school have any input? Are there any other goals that we haven't spoken about that any schools would like to be addressed?
And we also want to share some facts that if we successfully replace thermal power generation with nuclear power, and if that can be if that policy can be put into effect, and in the future the scientists can develop the nuclear energy into more steady and less thermopolluted technologies, and there will be rewards of the following. First, because Taiwan's electricity is mostly generated from thermal power plants. So if adopting this solution, it's very likely to reduce air pollution and guarantees the people's health, such as the chance people get respiratory diseases will be lowered. And second, if less carbon dioxide is released into the atmosphere, the rate of the significant historic monuments being corroded will slow down. Thank you.
So we have about 5 minutes left. And I just want to note that there are 5 goals that it sounds like you've identified. So number 4, quality education. Number 7 is on energy, green energy. 10 on reduced inequalities. 11 on sustainable cities and communities, and 12 on responsible consumption and production. Over the next 2 sessions, those will be the goals that we'll focus on. So yeah, if there are any that I missed in taking notes, pipe up now. Okay, it looks like Quaker Valley.
I think that number 6, clean water and sanitation, is also really important, and I feel like we're making strides in technology that can really help people in those developing countries that don't have access to clean water. So I feel like that should be a point of focus as well.
Okay, great. Any others? Any other goals that you want to focus on? Any school? Okay, so we have, so adding clean water, so number 6, clean water and sanitation. Is there someone else? Northwestern?
You're talking about we would like to add goal number 3, ensure healthy lives and promote the well-being at all ages.
So that's so we're looking at approximately half of the 17 goals. So I think that's really exciting and ambitious. So during the next 2 sessions, you'll kind of drill down into the goals a little bit more. So you'll kind of look at the targets. So each goal has associated targets. So I think there are 17 goals, but 187 associated targets. And over the next few months, we'll start to see how the United States is planning on implementing these goals. And it'd be great if you could start thinking about your own communities in addition to kind of looking abroad as well. So, what does good health and well-being mean here in Pittsburgh as well as in Taiwan and Erie? What does quality education look like? And for schools in Pennsylvania especially, we're in the middle of kind of some budget battles, and a lot of that involves education funding, and so that's something you really might want to pay attention to. Clean water and sanitation, what does that mean here? And what might that mean in other communities? So we'll kind of drill down a little bit more into them over the next 2 sessions, and as you're doing that, you'll kind of think about ways that you might want to take action. Actions large or small. It looks like there's still a hand at Northwestern.
I know that there was a study shown or done a couple of years ago about the average international distance for clean water, which was around 6 miles globally. And for America, it was like 10 to 15 to 20 feet apart from clean water. And that's like one of the really big issues with clean water for now, because America has really close clean water, and internationally it's extremely far distance between the average clean water.
Yeah, thanks for that. So that's like a kind of a fun fact, but so when we're thinking about clean water and sanitation in the Pittsburgh area, we're looking at how every time it rains, the sewers overflow and you can't use the rivers. It's kind of gross. There's poo in the river water. You can't, ride your kayak in the river because it's really dirty and you can get sick. Whereas in some places in the world, you're having young girls not go to school because they're carrying water 6 miles per day for their families, up to 2 times a day, many, many hours. So yeah, it looks really different in different places, but it's, the sanitation issues here in Pittsburgh have a huge impact on our region's economy. And all that water flows downstream. So it's all going somewhere. So yeah, so these things look different in different places, and so it's like kind of hard to wrap your brain around what this goal means both here and overseas, but exciting job that we have moving forward. So we're going to wrap things up. I just want to thank Rachel and Duncan. Thank you for being for being brave and being our first moderators. So as we move around, we'll have different student moderators in different schools. I want to thank all of you for being here today, and for Cornell High School for hosting us. I also want to thank Kinber. That's who makes what you're seeing on the screen possible, so all the technology in the background. And I want to thank our friend at Quest Tech, who's here also helping with the technology to make sure this actually got recorded this morning. So thank you all for being here, and we'll see you in a couple months. And again, ambitious goals moving forward. Take care. Have a great day.
Thank you. Hey, Mary. Taiwan.
Yes. Hi, Michael. Hi, Joe.
Fine. Did you see Joe? I got Joe on.
Yes, I do.
Can you see him?
Yes, yes. So we actually, Brian just texted and said that, you're on screen.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to make sure y'all could say hi to each other. You know, I didn't know.
We say hi to each other all the time.
Okay.
Yes, we do.
Okay. No problem at all. Talk to you guys later.
Bye. Bye.